Run to Old Navy. One day only today. Summer tees for the whole family are on sale. Just $4 for adults, $3 for kids and toddlers at Old Navy and OldNavy.com. Hurry in or miss out. Ends tonight. Valid 6/29. Select styles only.
Welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to Mushing Radio here on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. You can find us over on social media and on our website at dogworksradio.com. And make sure you check us out anywhere you find your podcast. Just search for Dogworks Radio. And calling in from California is our co-host. His name is Alex Stein. Alex, how's it going?
It's going great, Robert. I know that we are, in some ways, we're sort of in the dog days of summer, no pun intended, but in other ways, we are really just at the beginning of Iditarod 2019. And so that's very exciting. As we're recording this, we're having the volunteer picnic is tomorrow, and people will start signing up for next year's race.
They are. You know, I was looking at social media before we went on air today, and I see a lot of the kennel pages are saying, going to sign up tomorrow, or should we sign up for the Quest or Iditarod or both? And, you know, people are definitely excited. It's always a fun time. That last Saturday in June when that picnic happens. And it's exciting because not only do the mushers sign up that day, but if they sign up in person, I believe they give away 2 free entries, and that's nothing to sneeze at when the entry fee is several $1,000s.
Right, and you know we've talked about the entry fee has gone up in the past few years, and so being able to get your entry fee back is a very, very big deal. And for people who have been planning on running the 2019 race and have been planning this, you know, probably in most cases for several years, to be able to go down and do this in person, I think is really exciting. I have not yet attended the picnic, but I'm going to go one of these years because it just always seems like it's a really, really good time.
And the weather is always absolutely beautiful this time of year. It's not too hot, at least from Alaska standards, and hot up here is anything over 75 degrees. It's usually really, really pretty up here, really beautiful time to come up and visit. And, of course, a great time to see a bunch of the mushers who you probably would not recognize without a bunch of parkas and big mittens and snow boots and all that.
Right, and you know we've talked in the past about the Iditarod being very much kind of a family, having a family feel to it, and so for a lot of the longtime volunteers and longtime race fans, being able to go and spend some time with their favorite mushers and being able to have that, you know, up close and personal time is really, really valuable, and we are far enough away from the race where maybe people are talking about training and maybe people are starting to put their training plans in place, but it's not like right before the race where everyone is a little bit behind and trying to do a million things before they have to get on the trail to Nome.
Right. But, you know, the Iditarod is not without news. I know when we spoke last time a couple of weeks ago, it was right after the release of some news about a board meeting where they were going to make some changes here in the coming months with, you know, who can be on the board and who's going to get voted in and how many dogs are going to be on the trail. And several things were in the works. But now in this last couple of weeks, we've gotten a couple of pieces of news that may not sit well with a bunch of Iditarod fans. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I'll start with the sponsor news. We've had increasing, focus on the Iditarod and on Iditarod sponsors by PETA and some other animal rights groups. And it was just announced this week that Jack Daniels is not going to be supporting the race anymore. They have been a longtime sponsor of Iditarod for the past 15 years, and they were the subject of an intense campaign by PETA to get people to speak out against it and to get people to pressure the Jack Daniels board. They are claiming, the Jack Daniels company is claiming that this is not a result of these actions by PETA, but instead that Jack Daniels is going to be shifting most of their marketing to a new partnership that they're developing with the NBA. And as a result of that, they're cutting back on sponsorship for a lot of other events, including, unfortunately, Iditarod.
Right, and say what you will about having an alcohol sponsor for the race or not. I don't think that that's much of a discussion, but up here in Alaska, that promotion by Jack Daniels was a huge promotion, especially at the local liquor stores, and up here several of the big grocery store chains like Fred Meyer's and Carr's, which is Safeway, and a lot of the major gas stations also sell alcoholic beverages, and there was always a huge promotion around Iditarod with Jack Daniels. They would have a huge display of their products and, pictures of Iditarod and how they're sponsoring this or that. So it was not just a minute sponsor that was not a big deal. This was a major player in corporate sponsorship for the Iditarod, just in terms of the general public and what they see in terms of advertising just on a day-to-day basis as they shop in and around the Anchorage area of Alaska. So I think this is a big deal. What are your thoughts?
I agree with you, and it does make me sad to see this sort of sponsorship go, because not only is it money that's coming into Iditarod, but more importantly, it's a marketing push. And again, not to get into the ethics or whatever of having alcohol companies sponsor the race, but alcohol companies traditionally spend a tremendous amount of money in marketing and advertising, and they've gotten to the point where they can do this sort of thing very, very well. So, if you have $20,000 or $50,000 that an alcohol company is spending, and I know that the actual amount is much more than that, but that's something that can get a lot more bang for the buck than if you had another company from an industry that maybe doesn't do marketing as well, who could even be spending a lot more and not reach the audience, not reach the eyeballs, not reach the consumers. And we can also argue back and forth about, is it really necessary to have displays and to have ads in liquor stores? People especially in Alaska already know about the Iditarod. But as you said, it was a real focused reminder for people.
Right. And, I know a lot of people said when the big sponsor pulled out, Wells Fargo, that not a big deal. We can always have a local bank or a smaller bank come in and take place. And they did that. I believe it was North Rim Bank, which is a much smaller bank than Wells Fargo. But as you just mentioned, Alex, they don't have the firepower, as you said, like a Wells Fargo does, where they can pretty much just throw money at a marketing plan like they did. Wells Fargo was big into the promotion of Iditarod, and now when you have a much smaller bank, like I believe it's North Rim Bank, I didn't see any advertisement last year for the Iditarod with that bank, and to be quite frank, I don't even know where there is a branch for North Rim Bank up here in Alaska. I'm sure there are there, but there's a Wells Fargo at every corner, and people make those associations when they deal with companies. They say, I'm going to go to this bank because they support this sport or they support my favorite team or whatever. That's what connections are made with sponsorships. It's just not the dollars that they put up. It is the customer relationships that they build between the days of the race or the sporting event or whatever they're sponsoring. That's where the real magic happens, and that's what the sponsors are looking for. They're not necessarily looking for the big bang that they're getting out of a marketing ploy by the sport itself. They're looking for all that residual effect that comes from all of the customers year-round. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely 100% agree with that. And, it's very, very hard to get that kind of goodwill, and it takes years to build it. And then if you take something away, you can really destroy a lot of that very, very quickly. And another thing I wanted to mention is that the Iditarod Trail Committee is trying to put a good face on this and saying that it's an opportunity to refocus and to try to get more local sponsors and more sponsors who are more connected with the sport. But I would have to think that to have a high-profile company like this pull out is something that's got to hurt.
Oh, I agree. So it'd be interesting to see what happens next. I don't know if other companies will sort of follow the leader, so to speak, and how that's sort of working out. And like we said, we don't know if it's a campaign from the animal rights groups that are getting these people, or it's redirected business practices, as Jack Daniels said. And I believe the same thing was said to Wells Fargo. And that's sort of just CYA from the business. They're not going to say anything negative. They're always going to put it out in a good light and saying, oh, we're going to do other things, but we still fully support X, Y, Z. But, obviously, if they're going to make a very conscious business decision, whether they're as large as Wells Fargo or Jack Daniels, or as small as, the mom and pop, whoever that may be, it is a conscious decision that I'm sure is not taken lightly. So I think that's where things are going to get interesting as this race develops over the next couple of years. But moving on, Alex, I know you have two other pieces of news that's been talked about pretty heavily over the last couple of weeks. One piece of news was just sort of dropped on us at like midnight a couple of nights ago. That was really out of left field. Nobody knew. Nobody saw it coming. Which one do you want to talk about first?
Let's talk about Mitch Seavey first, I think.
Okay.
Mitch is a three-time Iditarod champ. He comes from what I think you can pretty well say is Iditarod royalty. His father ran the race and was one of the founders of the race back in the 1970s. His son Dallas has won the race 4 times. Mitch is the oldest man ever to win the race. Dallas is the youngest man ever to win the race. So Mitch is always, for the past, maybe 8 or 10 years, has been always right up there in the running to either win the race or finish, very, very high up. And he has recently announced that he is sitting out the 2019 Iditarod. And he said it's the first time in the last 25 years he's not going to sign up for it. And he put out a statement that said that he loves the Iditarod, and he said, I'm willing to accept a lot of things I don't really agree with, but there are 2 existing circumstances which are unacceptable to me because they leave mushers too vulnerable. And those things are Dr. Maury Craig is going to continue as the chief of the drug testing for Iditarod, and the second one is the new personal conduct rule, or as it's sometimes called, the gag rule, which in the past had been in effect from when people signed up for the race until 3 months after the end of the race, and now it's going to be something that will last all year round. So those are the 2 things. I have a feeling, I don't like to put words in people's mouths, but I have a feeling that for Mitch, the much more important issue is the issue of Dr. Maury Craig, and he had some problems with Dr. Craig's past, some of his conduct, and as listeners and longtime Iditarod fans will recall, that this is the person who was in charge of the drug testing that ultimately resulted in Dallas Seavey, Mitch's son, being ruled to have had dogs on his team that had banned substances, even though it turned out there was not any penalty associated with this. That left a really bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. It left Dallas, I think, kind of furious with Iditarod, and so although Mitch has said that it doesn't specifically have to do with Dallas, I have to think that is a big part of it. What do you think about that?
I have a few points on that. Maybe we can discuss a little further. The first point I want to make is we talked just a few minutes ago about sponsors. And I know just a few weeks ago, one of Mitch Seavey's major sponsors, which was Young Living, it's those essential oils that folks use, their founder died pretty unexpectedly. And within just a couple of days of that, Young Living pulled out as their sponsor for Mitch Seavey's kennel, as well as another race that they were the title sponsor of, which is the Race to the Sky in Montana. And Mitch said that it wasn't a big deal. They were just going to move on and do their own thing. We're perfectly fine without having them as a sponsor, and the Young Living people said pretty much the same thing. So it's interesting how a major sponsor pulled out of their kennel as their sort of top sponsor, which I found interesting, kind of relating to this. And secondly, just a point to bring up, I was watching the news coverage when they were doing the board meeting that we talked about at the top of the show, and right there in the front row was Mitch and Dallas, and I believe even Dan Seavey was there in attendance and listening to the proceedings, and it was on the news and whatnot, and I believe that they spoke during that conference to the news reporters about it. And I don't recall exactly what they said, but I think that they said that they weren't happy with the decision. So I think this was all leading up to this announcement. And as I mentioned just before we started talking about this, we found out about this really at the 11th hour. It was, I believe, like Monday or Tuesday this week. Craig Medred, and regardless if you agree with his policies or politics or not, he is very quick to get to the news. He released an article around midnight, kind of an interesting place to drop news of this magnitude in sort of the Iditarod world. So I found that that's interesting. And my third point, which maybe we can discuss, is, you hear a lot on social media in particular about now all of these fans are going to start boycotting Iditarod because this major name dropped out, sort of like a celebrity worship or a hero worship type thing is going on. My guy isn't going to be there anymore, therefore I'm going to boycott the race. And I think that has a larger implication, at least from a fan's perspective, than from a competition's perspective, because, of course, there are 50 or 60 or 70 other mushers going to be out there that can contend for that race title, which Mitch obviously is one of the top mushers out there. But that's what I want to discuss. What do you think of it from a fan's perspective now that sort of one of the big boys, the Tom Brady's or the Peyton Mannings of the football world, have pulled out and sort of left that gaping hole for fans to follow?
I hear people say things like this all the time, not just in relation to Iditarod, but in relation to everything. They say, I'm not going to go see this movie because I don't like the person they cast in it, or I'm never going to watch baseball again because my team traded my favorite player. And my impression, and I could be totally off base on this, but my impression is that this is the sort of thing people love to say to blow off steam, and they almost never actually follow through with it. I'm thinking of it in terms of your real diehard Iditarod fans. It strikes me all the time how fans definitely have their favorites, but it's not like someone only is watching Iditarod or only following Iditarod because they're a Mitch Seavey fan or a Dallas Seavey fan or Lance Mackey or Jeff King or whatever single musher you want to pick. It always seems to be the case that people have their favorites, but they're more fans of the race itself and maybe even just the idea of the race. And while certainly we want to have we as fans want to have the best mushers and the best teams and the best dogs possible, I think for a lot of people, as long as you have 6 or 7 of the really, really top mushers in the race, I think it's still going to be viewed as legitimate, and people are going to, even if they might threaten that they're not going to follow it anymore, I think they will.
I totally agree with you. People ask me all the time, and I watch a lot of sports on TV, and I've been to many sports events in my lifetime, just about every sport, baseball, football, basketball, hockey. And people always ask me, what is your favorite team, or who is your favorite player, or whatever? And I always tell them, ever since I was a little kid, I don't necessarily have a favorite team or a favorite player. I just enjoy watching sports. I don't care necessarily who's playing or who's winning or who's losing. I just like the competition and sort of the stories behind sports. And that's what I like to see in terms of watching sporting events on TV or in person. With that, and I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about this in our next piece of news, is how diehard people become as fans and how just vile and vindictive they can become over how they either defend or defame people over their actions. And social media is a big culprit with that. I know it happened in the past. I know people were just as vile and just as vindictive before, but now it is absolutely crazy about what people say about each other and about, people's past or upbringing or stature or reputation or whatever. It's becoming nasty, isn't it?
It really is. And, part of it is that there kind of aren't any consequences to doing that. You can just spout off and say horrible, hateful things, and pretty much 99.9% of the time there's not going to be any real consequences to that. I have a friend who's very active in Alaskan politics and used to say that in Alaska the politics were not quite as nasty because people knew that they would be running into these people at the grocery store. And if you know that you're going to run into someone in the grocery store, it makes you pull back a little bit from being so insulting and so negative about everyone. So I agree with you. There's a lot of things I love about social media, but the way people just get incredibly nasty and cut each other down without any knowledge of who this person is one of the worst parts of it.
Funny you said that about running into people at the grocery store. Just this afternoon, Alex, my wife Michelle was at the local Fred Meyer's, and she was doing her shopping, and lo and behold, here comes the mayor of Mat-Su Valley, Vern Halter, who happens to be our neighbor, but he is, as you said, the people that are in politics that you meet into the grocery store, and they stopped mid-aisle and had a conversation about, the goings-on in the neighborhood and about mushing and everything else. But it's true. This is still a very small community, whether we're talking about Alaskan politics or Alaskan mushers. And by and large, most of the people that do run Iditarod are local folks. They are Alaskans, whether they're up here on a couple of year basis to run the race, whether they're doing qualifiers or whatnot, or they're just residents of Alaska. These folks are our neighbors, and it's just interesting to see people that I know personally talk so badly about others, whether it be former champions like Mitch Seavey or Dallas Seavey about his the doping case with his dogs, or our next story that we're going to talk about in just a second, Hugh Neff. All of these people I know personally, and they're just so vile in their goings-on social media. It just is really disheartening. And like you said, there's no repercussions other than that page that they're talking on blocks them, and then, of course, they can come on as somebody else. That's really the only repercussion that can happen with this sort of unregulated behavior. Yeah,
absolutely. And I know we just have a few minutes left, but moving on to the third story, Hugh Neff was censured, I guess is the right term, by the Yukon Quest. Has to sit out the 2019 race over dog care and the death of one of his dogs in the 2018 race. Has to sit out 2019, and then they said that in order for him to run the long Yukon Quest, the 1,000-mile race, that he would have to first run and complete the Yukon Quest 300, which is the mid-distance race. Hugh appealed it, and his appeal was just denied. He had some complaints about the appeal process. Apparently, he was promised that it would be a 5-member board with 2 mushers, 2 vets, and someone from the outside community. And instead, it was only a 3-member board, 1 musher, 1 vet, and 1 outside member. And apparently, they didn't announce who the musher was, but apparently the musher, I believe, and Hugh have had a history of not getting along, and Hugh didn't feel like this was someone who could really be objective and unbiased. And so Hugh made a public remark that he felt like the Yukon Quest had a vendetta against him for being a large personality and for being someone who gets a lot of attention. It's the entire thing is just very sad to see this go down, and I'm not really sure what to make of it because I'm not there, and I'm not I don't really know how these things work. But what are your thoughts about that?
Well, first off, full disclosure, I am friends with Hugh. We've been friends for a long time, and I still very much respect him as a friend with that. So I haven't really formulated a concise thought on the whole thing, but I will say it's interesting that all of a sudden he is the first one where they have gone to this lengths to remove from the race. There has been several dog deaths in both the Yukon Quest and the Iditarod over the last several years, and nobody has faced this type of discipline before. I don't know if this is the new norm. I know a lot of people have said that it's because of what happened pre-race, why this happened. But then you could say, well, is it all on Hugh's thought or problem because it happened pre-race? It could be, but it's also the veterinarian's job to say, no, this dog cannot run in this race, and they have full right to do that, whether it's at the starting line or every other checkpoint along the trail. I'm not making excuses for anyone, but it's just interesting how in all of these years, and of course dog deaths should not happen, but in all of these years, nobody has been censured like this with the exception of Hugh. So I find it very interesting to see if this is going to be the new norm. What are your thoughts on that? And then secondly, what are your thoughts on this strictly from a fan's perspective about how this could potentially change things in the next several years in both of these long-distance races, and, of course, as they work their way down into the smaller races like the qualifiers and the mid-distance races and so on? It's a very interesting thing because I obviously don't. I wasn't there. I don't know what happened with that dog. I'm not really sure what to make of it. I've heard a lot of things on both sides. But if you were running a race and you decided that things had been a little bit too lax in the past and you wanted really to clamp down, this would be a great way to do that because you are punishing someone who is very well known, and I think that sends a message to everyone else that if they're willing to go after a former champion, then they're willing to go after almost anyone. So that's one thing. Hugh has also said that he is in this lifestyle to be a musher, not to be a competitor in a race. So he's still contemplating whether or not to run Iditarod. There's still a question of whether Iditarod might ban him as well from the 2019 race because he's been banned from Yukon Quest. I don't think we've heard a definitive answer to that one way or the other. But he said even if he can't run either of these races, he's going to be out there running his dogs because for him it's all about the dogs. So
I don't really know what to make of it, but I do think that we are going to settle into a new normal that is much, much stricter when it comes to the treatment of dogs, and especially to people being held more responsible when there are dog deaths.
If I could just say one other thing to that, Alex, you talked about sort of the new norm and how they can potentially clamp down on this, and this would be a great way to do so. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about the Dallas Seavey situation. Now, I know that was a personal decision on his part to not do Iditarod last year, but it's sort of in the same category. There was the several time past champion with Dallas, who was sort of the Iditarod golden boy, and they let the hammer down on him too on the other side of the distance races. They said, well, this is the person, whether we wanted to say it publicly or not, this was the person, and this is how we're going to make an example of it. And the Yukon Quest did the same thing. Hugh Neff is a two-time past champion of the Yukon Quest, has been running both races for several years, and they let the hammer down on him as well. And we've talked many times on this show on whether this same type of judgment for other types of rules would be the same for a lesser-known person. I remember several years ago we were talking about the story with Brent Sass and the iPod and him getting disqualified, and whether that would have happened to one of the the royalty of the sport, whether whoever that would be, a Lance Mackey or Didi Jeanreau or Martin Bucer or whatever, would they receive that same type of punishment that Brent Sass was? And he was a very up-and-coming musher at that point. It's just interesting how all of a sudden in the last couple of years, two very high-profile mushers have received very negative consequences for their actions. I think this is the new normal. Do you have any final thoughts on that?
I just wanted to add that, and full disclosure for me, I've met Hugh a couple of times, and I think he's a very colorful guy and brings a lot to the sport. But I think that Hugh is different from like a Dallas Seavey, and even though he's won the Quest twice, I think he has more of kind of an outlaw image, or an iconoclast who does his own thing. So I think that clamping down on Hugh Neff, who is a very, as a musher, he's kind of does a lot of high risk, high reward things. He takes chances that I think other people might back away from, and when they pay off great, and when they don't, they usually fail spectacularly too. So I think that if you were looking at which musher to punish, it would be easier to punish someone like Hugh Neff than someone who's a little bit more in that royalty category, like an Ali Zirkle or an Alan Moore on the Yukon Quest side.
We were talking about rooting for people and personal fandom. There are always going to be people that root for the Cowboys in the white hats and the Cowboys in the black hats. And, it's sort of that equal divide on which side you're on. Are you going to root for the good guy or the bad guy? So it's interesting how things play out. Alex, I know we're just about out of time, but, we've always talked about on this show that it should be about the dogs. And I want to make a quick announcement here on the show. Starting this week, my wife, Michelle, and I have started a brand new podcast. It's going to be our podcast for our kennel, Team Aneke, and we're going to tell stories about our dogs on every episode. And I think that's what this sport needs. We need more stories about the dogs. Now, of course, I haven't ran Iditarod or Yukon Quest, or I'm not one of these quote-unquote royalty in the mushing families as we've talked about today. But I think if we have a show that showcases stories about the dogs, that's what we need. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a very, very exciting kind of show, and I agree with you. I think we do need more things like that. There are some people who are good at social media who have been telling those kind of stories either on blogs or web pages, Facebook pages, sometimes on Twitter, and I'm very excited about that. I'm really looking forward to that new podcast.
I am too. We got our first one recorded, and it's about our namesake, Aneke. It's a very interesting story, and that will drop here on our feed shortly. Just if you are subscribed, just make sure you check that out, and you will see the pictures of the dogs and whatnot. And like you said, there are many people out there doing great work on social media and on Twitter in particular. I know you are Twitter friends with probably the most high profile of the mushers on Twitter, Blair Braverman and Quint Mountain, I believe is what he goes as on
Yep.
Twitter. And boy, I tell you what, they have one heck of a Twitter feed about their sled dogs, don't they?
They really do, and they go on adventures, and you really feel like you're being taken along with them as they travel. So I would definitely recommend following both of them. And they've started this new hashtag, which is #Musher Twitter. So you can search for that as well.
Excellent. Alex, anything else you want to say?
Just that it's exciting that it seems like we were just at this point a year ago, but it's exciting that the picnic is tomorrow, and we'll have dozens and dozens of people who, by this 24 hours from now, will have signed up for the race.
Right, and just a quick update. I know you did a very eloquent post yesterday about your shoulder injury that I have a little bit to do with, since you were running my sled dogs, and you talked about it a couple of shows ago about your sort of adventures and misadventures as a first-time musher, and you gave a very positive outlook about where you sit right now with your shoulder injury and getting back to being one piece. So I do want to encourage your good healing. It looks like you're going to be on the mend, and who knows, maybe next year you'll be back up to Alaska and we'll get you on that sled again.
Absolutely. That's actually one of my goals.
Excellent, for sure. Well, the door's always open at our house, and I'm sure the dogs would love to take you on a ride. But remember, the number one rule in mushing is do not let go of the sled, because they do not care if you're back there or not. They're going to keep on going, and it is your job to hang on. And hopefully when you get up here next time, we will make sure that nothing happens to you, and you walk off the property in one piece. That's at least my promise to you. I hope that I can keep it.
That sounds great. And I may have to be in bubble wrap. I'll be surrounded in bubble wrap if I need to.
Hey, that's okay. Alex, it's always a pleasure. We'll talk again in a couple of weeks, okay?
Okay, thanks, Robert.
Thank you. On behalf of my co-host today, Alex Stein, this is Robert Forto for Mushing Radio. We'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
The Starlight Lounge presents An Evening with the Progressive Box.
Oh, what a great audience. Let's dim the lights for this next one. Oh, too much. There it is. Gotta get things just right. Like Progressive's Name Your Price tool. Tell us what you want to pay, and we help you find coverage options that fit your budget. And now, the mood is right. Wait, the lights are back on again. Trudy, can you? And now it's completely dark.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Red, white, and blue savings at the Home Depot means the best prices of the season on new appliances, up to 40% off special buys. Like the Whirlpool White Top-Load Washer and Electric Dryer, just $548 each, over $500 off the pair. We'll even toss in free delivery. When it comes to appliances, we're pushing all the right buttons. Red, white, and blue savings now at the Home Depot. More saving, more doing. Valid through July 11th, U.S. only while supplies last. Gas dryer extra free delivery on purchases of $396 or more.